Donald Trump continues to be the frontrunner in the GOP field and is enjoying his polling lead as we head into Iowa and New Hampshire. But what do his poll percentages really mean in these summer months? And can he parlay those numbers into winning a bid for the nomination? Harry Enten is the senior political writer and analyst for FiveThirtyEight's.com, and he recently looked into the significance or lack thereof of leading in the summer polls for his articles, Candidates in Donald Trump's Position Have a Terrible Track Record. Let's find out what he means as he joins us from New York. What do you mean, Harry?
What I essentially mean, Larry, is that if candidates are up in the early polls, Iowa, New Hampshire, and nationally, and they're leading with more than 1/3 of the vote, those candidates tend to go on and win nominations. But Donald Trump isn't anywhere near 1/3 of the vote in either of those states or nationally. He is only at about 20% in Iowa, only about 25% nationally, and in between there in New Hampshire. And so those candidates who are polling as low as Trump is tend to not win the nomination. In fact, they tend to fall apart as we head towards Iowa, New Hampshire, and the rest of the primary season.
But, Harry, in those previous campaigns, there weren't 17 candidates. That is a great number for the amount of candidates, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it depends on which way you look at it. The way that I tend to see it is that we have all of those candidates because this is a nomination that's well worth having, and that if any one of those candidates were very, very strong, they'd be polling very, very highly. Remember, in 2000, there were well over 10 candidates at one point, the 2000 Republican campaign, that is, and then George W. Bush broke out and was able to get 45% of the vote in early Iowa, New Hampshire polls, and was able to go on and win the nomination. Trump, on the other hand, isn't getting anywhere near there. He's not blasting away the field. So there are prior campaigns in which there were a lot of candidates, and still the leaders were able to break out with much greater percentages of the vote than Trump is right now.
What if Trump wins Iowa and New Hampshire? What would that do to your figures?
Well, it would certainly boost my readership figures, but in terms of where we're heading for the campaign, look, Donald Trump needs to get support from actual people within the Republican Party. We're talking party actors, senators, governors, House of Representative members. Until he does that, he's not going to really go anywhere. Because remember, Paul Zongas in 1992 won New Hampshire, looked like he was going to do fairly well, but he had no support within the party. Candidates who do not have the support of the party actors simply haven't been able to win nominations going back to since we selected candidates via primaries instead of the smoke rooms, and the parties got used to exactly how that worked out.
Has Jeb Bush been a disappointment to this date?
I would say that Jeb Bush is about where you'd expect somebody who hasn't run for office since 2002 would probably be. I mean, yeah, he has the Bush name and he has a lot of money, but he's rusty. The Republican Party, we know this from surveys, has moved further and further to the right, and Jeb Bush is sort of stuck with this compassionate conservative label. He is somebody who still has a real decent shot of winning. I'd put it probably about 25 to 30% to win the nomination, but he's somebody who is a candidate of yesteryear and somebody who still has his brother's name lassoed around his neck.
When you look at the national picture in the Electoral College, blue states, purple states, red states, does this come down to a few counties in Ohio and a few counties in Florida as to who is the next president?
Well, I mean, historically speaking, if you're a Republican candidate, you need to win Ohio. No Republican candidate has ever won the presidency without winning Ohio. Florida is a little bit more interesting, but yes, those two states are certainly important. But in this day and age, we also have other key swing states. Virginia, Loudoun County, Nevada, Washoe County, Colorado, the suburbs around Denver are very, very important. So all of these states are important. Florida and Ohio, yes, they are, but there are other states, too, that I'm certainly going to be looking at as we head into the campaign and the general election.
You recently wrote a piece entitled "The Bernie Sanders Surge Appears to Be Over." Where do you see that?
Well, what we had seen, we do see it still in Iowa. Hillary Clinton is polling well ahead of where she was at this point 8 years ago. Remember, in fact, in the August polling, Clinton was basically tied with John Edwards, who has since gone on to infamy, obviously. In New Hampshire, yeah, she was ahead, but her percentage of the vote was actually slightly lower than it is right now in New Hampshire. Nationally, she was only at around 39, 40% of the polls right now nationally, depending on which poll you look at. She's at 50%. And then throughout the South, where there are a lot of African-American voters, where Barack Obama did very, very well, Clinton is winning upwards of 70 to 75% of the votes in some of these states. There were recent surveys from South Carolina and Alabama. And Clinton is holding those while Sanders really hasn't made any sort of dent in the South, even as his numbers have begun to climb in New Hampshire and to a lesser degree in Iowa and nationally.
If the FBI investigation leads not to no indictment, do you expect Hillary to be the nominee, and would you make her the favorite in the race?
If there are no other shoes to drop, and I don't know exactly what the FBI has and what doesn't have, but if there are no other shoes to drop, Hillary Clinton is almost certainly going to win this nomination. Again, it comes down to support from voters and from the inner workings of the party. And Hillary Clinton at this point, if you look at how many senators, governors, and House of Representative members have endorsed her, it's more than double the amount than she had in 2008 at this point, the 2008 cycle. She is in a very, very strong position. However, if, let's say, another shoe does drop, then a lot of things are on the table. Perhaps we get an entry from somebody like Joe Biden or maybe even a John Kerry, and then all bets are off.
All right, let's assume that nothing does happen, no shoe drops. Would you make her a favorite in the general election?
I would say that if you look at the polls right now, she is ahead in most of those over the Republican candidates. However, she is universally well known. The numbers that I would look at are, number one, where's the president's approval rating right now? It's only in the mid-40s. That's not a good sign if you're Hillary Clinton. You look at when you eliminate the candidates and ask, would you prefer a Democratic candidate or a Republican candidate to be the next president? The Republican candidate tends more often than not to be leading by a point or two. So I really am very uncomfortable saying that she would probably be the next president if she won the nomination. I put it pretty much at a 50-50 race at this point, a very exciting campaign.
What will be, do you think, the one big issue in November of 2016?
I think the one big issue in most campaigns is the state of the economy. Do people really believe it's getting better? And if you look at some, economic indicators, it's doing fairly well. GDP, unemployment certainly dropped, but Americans still do not have very high confidence in this economy. They believe that this economy is in fact going backwards. And the reason they believe that, in my opinion, is because incomes among the median family simply have not grown over the past few years. And if that continues to be the case, it could be somewhat of an uphill for the Democrats heading into the general election, and Hillary Clinton particularly.
How about immigration?
Immigration is an interesting one. You hear it a lot on the Republican side, but voters don't tend to make it their top issue, either among Republicans or Democrats or independents. But immigration could play a big role if you're talking about Latino voters in, swing states like Colorado, Nevada, Florida. Those states, if, let's say, Latinos do not feel that, Republicans are on their side, they could come out very much strongly for Hillary Clinton. Remember, Barack Obama won, about 72, 73, depending on which poll you looked at, of the Latino vote in the 2012 campaign. Hillary Clinton, if she does that again, it will make it very difficult for Republican candidates to win in states that have a lot of Latinos in it.
Why do you think Republicans keep this anti-immigrant attitude, which would be personified in Donald Trump, which is solely, totally anti-immigrant?
Well, I think that, they want to talk to voters. And a lot of Republican voters, a lot of white working class voters that are whites without college degrees, just do not feel that Latinos in this country, or particularly Latinos in this country are here illegally, should be here, and they're very, very upset with them. They may think that their jobs are being taken away, there's too much government funding going to them, and they just don't want them there. Remember, Trump doesn't come into this race as somebody who has a strong record of sticking to issue positions. He's talking to the base because that's what the base wants. The Republican base wants somebody who's going to be tough talking on immigration. Unfortunately for Republicans, the rest of the country isn't that interested in it, and in fact sees it potentially as being a little bigoted.
Harry, thank you so much. It's always very interesting. We'll be seeing a lot of you.
Thanks for having me.
For more of Harry's reporting, check out FiveThirtyEight.com or follow him on Twitter at Forecaster Enten.